Okay, this is the Unit 6 review packet, topic 16B. So we're adding and subtracting fractions, which means we need a common denominator. And we're looking for the least common denominator. So when I'm looking for a least common denominator, I want to make sure I'm including everything from both denominators. So on this first one here, I have x minus 4. And I'm going to put parentheses around both of these to indicate that that's a whole separate thing. So I have an x minus 4 over here. So I definitely need to include x minus 4. And then on the other side, the other denominator is x plus 2. So I need to include x plus 2. So my least common denominator is x minus 4 and x plus 2 times x plus 2. So now when I'm looking at So this is my least common denominator. I'm going to need to multiply the numerators of my fractions by what's missing. So I look over here at this first fraction, and I see that I have x minus 4 as my denominator. So I'm missing the x plus 2. So I'm going to multiply the first one by x plus 2. Second fraction I look at, and I can see that I have the x plus 2 of the least common denominator, but I'm missing the x minus 4. So I multiply these two, so 3 times x plus 2 plus 8 times x minus 4 all over the least common denominator of x minus 4, x plus 2. So now I just need to simplify it. So I'm going to distribute. So if I look here, I'm going to distribute this 3. That gives me 3x plus 6. I'm going to distribute the 8 plus 8x minus 32 all over my least common denominator. And then I'm just combining like terms. So 3x plus 8x is 11x. 6 minus 32 is negative 26. And again, that's still over the x minus 4, x plus 2. And I'm done because there's nothing I can factor out here, so there's nothing that can be canceled in my final answer. So let's look at the next one. So again, on the next one, I'm looking at finding a least common denominator because I can't add or subtract fractions without a common denominator. So I'm going to draw parentheses around these because these are separate items. They can't be separated up. They're a whole item. That x plus 1 is an entire item. It's not x and then the 1 separately. It's one whole thing. So I'm going to have to include x plus 1 as part of my least common denominator. And then I look over here, and this denominator is x minus 2. I'm going to need to include that. So now I'm going to look at each fraction. So that's my least common denominator. Now I'm going to go up here and see what I'm missing, because that's going to decide what I multiply by the numerator. So x plus 1, okay, I have the x plus 1, I'm missing the x minus 2. So on this first fraction, I need to multiply by x minus 2. The second one, I have the x minus 2, I'm missing the x plus 1. So I need to multiply times x plus 1. So now I'm going to multiply. I've got 3x times x minus 2 minus x times x plus 1 all over my least common denominator of x plus 1, x minus 2. So now I'm going to distribute. So I'm going to distribute this 3x. That gives me 3x squared minus 6x. I'm going to distribute the negative x squared minus x, and it's all over the least common denominator of x plus 1, x minus 2. Now I'm going to combine like terms. 3x squared minus x squared is 2x squared, minus 6x minus x is minus 7x, all over x plus 1, x minus 2. Now on this one I do have a GCF I can take out on the top. I could take out an x here, and that gives me 2x minus 7 over x plus 1, x minus 2, but I still can't cancel anything. I don't have anything that's exactly the same. So there's nothing there that can be canceled. All right, let's move on to the next one. So number 12, my first step is to find the least common denominator. And when I look down here, before I even find the least common denominator, I can see that this one's not factored. This denominator could be factored. There's a GCF of x, and when I take out x plus 4. All right, so now that I've factored the denominator, let's look and see what I've got. So I definitely have an x. That x needs to be part of my least common denominator. I have an x plus 4. That needs to be part of my least common denominator. And I look over here, and I also have x plus 4. It's the same. It's a partner to this. It's a pair. It matches up. There's one over here and one over here, so it's fair. I'm not going to add an extra x plus 4. These two are a pair. They go together. There's one here and one here. So I don't need to add a second one. I already have one. So now I look up here at what's missing for this first fraction, and nothing is missing because the denominator of this first fraction is my least common denominator. So I don't need to multiply the first one by anything. But the second one is missing the x. So I am going to have to multiply that one by x. So now I have 2 plus 3x squared over x times x plus 4. If I look over here, there is nothing I can pull out. There's no GCF up here, and there's nothing that can be canceled. So this is my final answer on that one. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Number 13. So again, before I look for my least common denominator, I look to see if I can factor the denominators. This first one can't be factored, but this one can. This is x plus 7, x minus 7. This is a difference of squares. So now I'm looking for my least common denominator. All right, over here I've got an x minus 7. I definitely need to include that. Over here I have an x plus 7. Definitely need to include that. But now I have another x minus 7. It's the partner to this one over on this fraction. I don't need to include it. I've already included it. It's this. It pairs up with that one. There's one here and one here. It's fair. They each have one. So that's my least common denominator. If I look at this first fraction, at what I'm missing, I have the x minus 7. I'm missing the x plus 7. So that's what I'm going to multiply by here. And this one I'm not missing anything. This is the least common denominator. There's nothing I'm missing. So now I have x times x plus 7 minus 16 over my least common denominator of x minus 7, x plus 7. I'm going to distribute this x squared plus 7x minus 16 over x minus 7, x plus 7. At this point here, you should see, can I factor this? Because if I could factor this, I might be able to cancel some things out. So are there two numbers that multiply to be negative 16 and add up to be 7? Well, you've got 1 and 16. Nope, that's not going to add to be 7. 2 and 8. Nope. 4 and 4. Nope. So there is nothing that I can, I can't factor the top, so there's nothing that's going to be canceled, so I'm done. All right, let's look at 14. So my first step is the least common denominator. So if I look here, I've got a 7, so I need to include that. I've got an x, definitely need x as part of it. I've got a 4, so we're going to multiply by, also by 4. And then I have an x, but I already did my x, right? This x, I've got one here, I don't need to include it again. I've already included it. So when I multiply this out, 7x times 4, I get 28x. That's my least common denominator. So now I look up here, what am I missing? Well, on this one I'm missing the 4. I need to multiply this by 4. On this one, I was missing the 7. I need to multiply that by 7. So I get negative 8 minus 35 over 28x. So then I'm going to simplify this. So I have negative 8 minus 35 is, let's see, negative 43 over 28x. And again, I should check and see, can I simplify this? Well, no. 43 over 28, it's a fraction, so make sure you can, if you can simplify it, you need to reduce it, but I can't simplify that fraction. So this is my final answer. All right, last one in this section, number 15. So this one is a complex fraction. I have more than one fraction on the top. I only have one fraction on the bottom. Complex fraction, I need to get it down to one fraction on the top divided by one on the bottom. So I'm already good on the bottom, so I got to work on this top one. So I'm looking for an LCD, a least common denominator on the top. Oh look, they already have a common denominator. It's x. So I'm good. I can subtract these. My common denominator is x. I have 3 minus 7, which is negative 4 over x on the top, and the bottom was already one fraction. And once I have a fraction divided by a fraction, then I just do my division. This is the first fraction. I change division to multiplication, and I flip the second fraction. This gives me top times top is negative 20. Bottom times bottom is 2x. Again, we always look to see if we can simplify, and we can. Negative 20 over 2 is negative 10, and over x. And that is topic 16b for Unit 6.